Hi, my name's Alex Williams, founder of the New Stack, and you are listening to the New Stack Analyst podcast, a show about application development and management at scale. Thanks for joining us. Cloudsoft is the sponsor for this episode of the New Stack Analyst. Cloudsoft AMP makes it easy to operate complex applications across any cloud provider, private, public, or hybrid. AMP's policy-based management transforms cloud operations and liberates applications from infrastructure, allowing you to mix and match bare metal, virtual machines, and containers. Learn more at cloudsoft.io. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at the Cloud Foundry Summit for another discussion today with Cloudsoft Duncan Johnston-Watt and Adam Lewis of Atos, and my good friend Sriram. How are you?
Good, thank you, Alex. Good to see you again.
Great, and Duncan, how you doing?
Fine, having a great time at this conference.
So, I want to talk a little bit about kind of, the whole concept, the whole theme here, I think, is around multi-cloud, right? And that goes to your roots, really, at Cloudsoft, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yes. So, when Sam, in fact, it wasn't just Sam, when Abby set out the user advisory board meeting just prior to the conference proper, that, here are the big themes, here are the big ticket items for us as the Cloud Foundry Foundation. It's multi-cloud and it's containers, and how do we play in that space? That was music to my ears, and of course, Sam reinforced that in his keynote.
Great, and so I have a question. So, in this multi-cloud world, right, how do you see Cloudsoft software evolving?
So we've always taken the view that one has to be cloud or infrastructure agnostic, right? That is, as you say, one of our fundamental tenets. Separate out the design, the blueprint from where you're going to deploy or target that blueprint, and then obviously once it's deployed, ongoing sort of management thereof. So for us, listening to the keynote and absorbing the messaging, multi-cloud means both being able to support Cloud Foundry itself on many different underlying infrastructures, and that's a big deal for them to sort of open up the platform even more than they have done. And then it's also about the services themselves. So of course we have the runtime applications, but increasingly it's how do they then access things like systems of record back in the enterprise, or how do they stand up rich back-end shared services, and on what infrastructure or cloud should that run? And that ties in beautifully with the work we've been doing with the community for the past year or so around the actual Apache Brooklyn service broker. So we contributed the original code to that February of last year, and it's currently being incubated. And so one of the big questions for me is, when do we come out of incubation? Because for us that's a big deal, being then part of the core Cloud Foundry release.
So Adam, tell us how you've been working with Cloudsoft and as part of this evolution, toward what we're kind of thinking about here is multi-cloud world. You guys did announce your own news about your own Cloud Foundry certification. How have you been working with Cloudsoft?
Yeah, and thanks very much for inviting me today. The conference has been awesome so far, and it's a pleasure to be here with partners such as Cloudsoft. One of the things that we've noticed in particular is when you're a large organization with a global presence like Atos is, we need a way to be able to customize the future needs of the application landscape of our customers. And that means you need a complete level of flexibility that people haven't had before now. The tools and services that we've created, we've chosen a core set of partners and technologies that enable us to drive that transformation of old world technologies across a multi-cloud infrastructure. And that's where working with the great team at Cloudsoft, working to create products based on open source technology, we're able to start doing that more than ever before.
Cool. Very good. Hey, congrats on the certification.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you talked about you have thousands of services, can you please talk a little bit more about why the multi-cloud is important for running those services there? Where is the need coming from?
Sure. So we run large-scale outsourcing contracts and systems integration projects and consulting assignments across almost every industry you can possibly imagine. Some of those have got very specific needs around data sovereignty, around their use of the cloud that best fits them. What we're seeing now, even though we own our own data centers and we have our own sets of cloud services, both public and private, we're also embracing the wider public cloud through partners as well. And that means we do a lot of work with Amazon, we're working with IBM, we're working with other partners which allow us to then say to our customers, you have the flexibility to have the cloud of your choice, and we're becoming much more cloud agnostic. So if people want specific clouds delivered within their geography with a certain level of security, data protection, backup recovery, all of those things, we need to be able to shoehorn that into a managed service offering that gives customers the confidence that they can they trust us to deliver on an ongoing basis the level of service that they expect when dealing with Atos.
Okay. Do you also have a private cloud angle to it, or is it just more of multiple geo-distributed public clouds?
So, for example, one of the things we've worked very hard on this year is to take Cloud Foundry and deploy it across vSphere, and we're able to offer that now as a private cloud on-premise or off-premise to our customers.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
So Duncan, I have a question for you about Cloudsoft overall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Cloudsoft has its roots in really in helping people compose the software itself. Mm-hmm. And now you have this Cloudsoft AMP, really, mm-hmm. which is designed to, essentially, as you guys run on your website to operate complex, applications across any cloud provider, private, public, or hybrid. And you have, so I'm looking directly at the site itself, and you talk about it being policy-based.
You're sounding like a lawyer. I'm reading your website, and I'm scared. I'm
trying to be your attorney here. You're not on the bench quite yet. But maybe you just tell it in your own words. Instead of me trying to dictate exactly what it is.
It's fine.
But how does this play into your evolution of a company, right? Because you have your roots in kind of
Multicloud,
helping people compose those applications, and this seems to move it a little bit into, it seems to show an evolution of your company itself.
So there's definitely a sea change. So I mean, whether we were all at OpenStack Summit a few weeks ago, and we had Donna Scott, standing up and talking about bimodal IT. I never thought I'd see that, but and other people have talked about two-speed technology, right, and so forth. Our view is not to dictate how, but to enable customers to move at the speed they want to move across this landscape. So, my background for many years was enterprise, so I know there is an awful lot of existing, perfectly good technology that people want to continue to use for years to come. So we have to provide a way of giving people the reach back capability to access that, particularly around data sources, data services, that no one in the right mind will move or should even think about migrating for the sake of it. There's also existing applications and services that one can migrate into the cloud. So we want to have we want to be heavily involved in enabling that process. But equally, looking at it from the other end of the spectrum, we also recognize that there is net new applications, and there are new platforms that enable that. And so in some ways, we chose Brooklyn because we're into bridging between the old and the new, bridging between on-prem and off-prem or off-world, if you will. And so this idea of being a bridge is something that's core to our DNA. And so what you're seeing is an evolution in the way in which we express that. And so the integration with Cloud Foundry is a great example of that. So we're big fans of this Cloud Foundry certification program because it literally took us 2 hours, and I mean that was probably stretching it with me fussing around making the tea, to actually stand up a brand new shiny Atos Cloud Foundry instance and connect it back into the Atos or Canopy Compose product, which is of course AMP behind the scenes, using the service broker in order to do that. So that as we go forward, it's that level of integration and the ease with which you can do that is going to be very powerful. And we want to make sure, close your ears at this point, Adam, but we want to make sure that we can do that with every Cloud Foundry certified provider, so that as a developer, you will get a consistent experience. If you have a set of services that you've developed against one Cloud Foundry environment and you move to another Cloud Foundry environment, we guarantee that you will see the same set of services, be they integrations to existing data sources or brand new, shiny services you want to stand up. And I think that's very important to have that. Again, it's all about choice. It's about being consistent across different Cloud Foundry providers. And so it also is a good smoke test of that provider. Does their CF live up to the advanced billing? And testing it through the service broker API is a great way of doing that.
So you talked about the net new applications. I mean, the journey is interesting and very, very informative to know about that. But you hinted upon the net new applications, right? Mm-hmm. So what kind of how do you see, from an AM perspective, right? What are your challenges, or how do you tackle them? How do you see the net new applications which are more cloud native and
So we are tracking, and in fact we're members of the CNCF as well as the CFF.
Yes.
And it's great to see the collaboration between those two groups, and that's, there is a spirit of collaboration between those two projects that goes beyond. So this is multi-project as well as multi-cloud now.
Right.
And I think that's really, really good to see. We see deployment and management remaining critical, whatever the domain of discourse, whether it's net new or whether it's existing or whether it's some kind of hybrid environment. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I'm heading off to GlueCon, where we're going to be talking about our work with the HyperLedger project. And what are we doing? We're deploying and managing blockchain networks. It's the same stuff. It's still software at the end of the day. It's a cool new platform. It still needs to be deployed and managed, and managed. Right. Don't never forget the and managed, and that's really, I think, key here.
So this is a question I think that comes up, and I think it's one for both you guys. Is so how do you see application infrastructure getting consumed? In this context. Then I mean, we're talking about a new era where the developers are consuming the application infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Right. Very directly.
Yep.
And you see that in the container ecosystem quite clearly. Mm-hmm. It's as relevant to developers as it is to people in operations, right? They have different uses for it, but we're seeing the need for more integrated tool environments. How do you see that application infrastructure getting consumed?
So we're fortunate enough to have experienced DevOps teams that we've created, but that's not an easy process to go through. To work in that new way of making people and the teams aware of how they can consume a persistent platform on demand, and how then you have new challenges. How do you actually manage that? That is requiring new processes, new governance models, new ways to automate or make those systems. Obviously, Cloud Foundry is already self-healing, but it's the wider capabilities around that. So we want to be able to grow and shrink the platform on demand. We want to be able to do the end-to-end user management. We want to be able to continue to offer the level of support that customers want. And presenting that, as I say, gives new challenges, but it's exciting because what they don't have is that downtime for waiting for those resources to become available. Literally, it's the click of a button, whether it be, can we have a new Postgres or Redis service using the service broker that Duncan and his team provide, whether it's just spinning up a new instance of Cloud Foundry, which we can do in well under 2 hours on something like AWS now, full end-to-end, fully managed. That's the world we're now in. So it's on-demand, platform persistence, fully managed, and then making that available to a highly set of trained DevOps staff who understand that actually this is a new world, and let's empower them to do not just continuous integration, continuous delivery, but real, true, continuous innovation as well.
So how do you view application infrastructure getting consumed?
I think,
and how do you see that in the evolution of Cloudsoft?
Sure. So over the past, let's say, half dozen years that we've been really focused on this aggressively, we've seen the birth of what we now know as Cloud Foundry. And in fact, we were chatting last night and somebody was saying, do you remember VMforce? And wow, that's time machine, but if you go way back to the beginning, and obviously we've had,
Is that
Google,
like the Forest VMU? Is that something like that?
it was a flashback, because you forget all this, right? We move so fast, and I mean, you guys commentate, of course, on what's happening, but we're always forging ahead. It's interesting realizing just how far we've come. So Cloud Foundry has kind of grown up during that period. Kubernetes, Mesos, great technology. So the landscape is evolving constantly. Our job, as we see it, is to understand, the nuances of each of those landscapes, how to target them, how to, deploy and manage applications into those environments, and where to let go, where to sort of back off. If a platform has a whole bunch of, as you say, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes, all these guys, they have a degree of automation and management within their sphere of influence, we should let them do it, not try and interfere. And I'd use an analogy, quite an old one now, but when vMotion first came into being, everyone was like, this is the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And I'm an applications guy going, this is a disaster. Because if you let a sysadmin loose on vMotion, they'll start doing stuff that is insane from the point of view of what the application needs. Yeah, I mean, so it's really understanding how to exploit these layers.
Well, I'd say as well, what we're seeing now is a requirement to go deploy and manage bare metal, deploy and manage in VM, deploy and manage into a Docker-based container, or deploy and manage into Cloud Foundry-based containers and that Cloud Foundry-based world. And you need stuff like Brooklyn to be able to do that. You want to have one standard set of tooling. That's why.
You need that standard set of tooling.
You need that standard tool, because otherwise you'll have different teams trying to take a different approach, and it becomes unmanageable. And when our contracts and the basis of our existence is to deliver great managed capability, not just at the start of a project, but for the whole application lifecycle, that's a fundamental basis that you have to build your services landscape on.
Would you call it non-interoperable or unmanageable? Like when they don't follow the standard, like a common service broker?
It becomes expensive. And as a business, you need to obviously think about the strategic plays you're making to make things as highly performant and as efficient as possible. And we try and optimize wherever we can. And that's one of the reasons why leveraging the AMP, creating what we call the Atos Compose capability based on the AMP Brooklyn technology, allows us to really give a different level of efficiency.
Okay. So I get this, all right?
You're convinced?
I'm entirely convinced. Hey, you can tell from my tone, right?
I have a question for Duncan. There's a but somewhere.
There's no but here. I guess my question really comes down to, the complexity here. There's a lot of complexity involved, and we are talking about things that people have never really done before, and we're talking about very new technologies. As you say, it's late. There's always this latest and greatest stuff, and there's such a discussion about the composition, of these applications. But for most people, that's really not easy to do. It's really not easy to compose all those things together. So when are we going to get to this point where, where there'll be almost like these environments where you can just run, maybe like their build environments that you can automatically. So these pieces can be fit together and you can start deploying them. I mean,
there are 3D solutions.
Is this the Martin Ford jobless future?
I'm looking at. So what's your vision of that robot future, Duncan?
I think our job is always to take complexity out, and that means ensuring you don't expose that. You don't. The fire hose of complexity is something that you do not want to point at the consumer of technology.
That burns.
That's now there are a few masochistical types who just revel in that. But I think in general our job is to avoid that.
Or help manage it, right? Or manage it down, because the complexity will always be there to some degree, but if you don't want it to get out of control.
Manage it down is kind of more of a stopgap, right? It's kind of from a system integrator point of view, it's a good win.
I don't think it's a stopgap. I think that you'll always have heterogeneous architectures, and you always have, especially the sort of larger organizations we've heard do great talks here over the last couple of days at the conference, and I'm sure there's more coming, but they have by definition that mixture, and so that you have to assume that's business as usual. but then you have to plan for that, and and wherever possible, you try and standardize the tooling, the process level, and also, of course, the architectural level, because it's one thing having a great platform, it's another thing getting people to know how to use it, right?
Let's take a quick break and then get back to the show. Cloudsoft is the sponsor for this episode of the new Stack Analysts. Cloudsoft AMP makes it easy to operate complex applications across any cloud provider, private, public, or hybrid. AMP's policy-based management transforms cloud operations and liberates applications from infrastructure, allowing you to mix and match bare metal, virtual machines, and containers. Learn more at cloudsoft.io. Now let's get back to the show. So is the multi-cloud essentially kind of just thinking about how different clusters work? So you might have like VM-based clusters and container-based clusters, and understanding, and not necessarily thinking about, a data center here and a data center there, but more thinking about like, multi-cloud in kind of the context of microservices almost, where you're like thinking about components and assembling the components across that kind of multi-cloud environment, or is that a different kind of?
I want to piggyback on that question a little bit. Like from you are talking to your customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the ask for multi-cloud, is it like imminent, real, or is it more like anticipatory? Where do you see that happening in terms of user adoption?
It's almost always now part of any kind of RFP or RFQ.
Okay.
What is your multi-cloud strategy? How are you going to help me?
Really?
How are you going to, what's my hedge is what they're really saying.
Are they talking about their own internal data centers and public clouds, or are they?
Quite often.
Yeah.
So some people call it hybrid still. I think it doesn't matter, whatever people want to call it, it's the fact that they want workload agility.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be able to run a capability or service, a workload, whatever you want to call it, one day in one platform somewhere, and be able to trust you've got the portability, because suddenly your business changes. You might want to scale up, you want to scale down, you might want to scale out. It might be that you can find a cheaper way to get infrastructure elsewhere. And that's where I think multi-cloud really starts getting exciting.
Okay. What you don't want to lose in this world is you don't want loss of information. So the information about the underlay, the way in which things are laid out, the networking, where are these compute locations? Ultimately, that is important information for some applications in some circumstances where things like data sovereignty and so on are really important. For other people, that's less interesting. But it's our job to preserve that knowledge and not lose it, but at the same time provide the right level of abstraction. So here's a concrete example of that. Working with the Blue Box team, we stood up clusters in San Jose, in London, and Singapore, and thanks to the sort of latest smarts,
for digital tree, or was it for digital tree use case, or?
It's to prove out exactly that model, and moreover exploit the software backplane so that actually we're not going out over the internet. So we've got a solid platform that's now fully meshed. So that means any Blue Box location can be meshed to any other.
Okay.
And what we're striving for is fidelity with the OpenStack environment, so that network is exposed as a shared private network and behaves exactly as you would expect if you're in a single cluster, but has the additional value or property that, if you connect from that and do it at 2 ends or 3 ends, you actually get connectivity. But you're getting over a very sort of controlled, managed network. Those kinds of things are hugely important to some applications, less interesting to others. In the case of blockchain, what's important about that? Well, I may want to have a permissioned blockchain network that's running across multiple locations where there are participants, in different locations. So each one of those is a part of a cluster, but you want to still create a single uniform blockchain network overall. You can do that kind of thing. Now, if I'm the guy consuming the service provided by the blockchain, all I want is access to that blockchain. I don't really give a damn how it's been implemented. If, on the other hand, I'm providing that, then I do. So it's really, using the right knowledge at the right layer in the stack and not losing or forgetting things along the way, or doing simplifying assumptions that turn out to be crass in the long run.
So,
Saying it's one large happy pool of things out there. I mean, okay, that's oversimplifying it.
Adam, did you have a thought?
I think Duncan's captured it very well. We need to stay focused on the wider technology as it comes through, and filter it down and make it consumable. And where we need to then help people consume it is by creating services that understand, and all levels of individuals within the organisation can understand how they can benefit from that.
So what does that mean, filtering? What do you mean by that?
I think that Cloud Foundry is hard for some people, right? To understand the benefits, in particular when they've been doing things for a long time in a certain way. Mm-hmm. PaaS can be difficult to understand the benefits from. The new methods, new processes, the new technologies, whatever you want to call it, that allows people to think differently for the first time. I really do think that this is a tectonic shift in a way that we can do applications different and better for the business. Mm-hmm. Now, that means that they will take some time, and what we're seeing now, and with over the conferences, and I'm lucky enough to have been to a couple of them now over the last few years, is we can see the way it's growing, the way that the community is going to drive and push that adoption and make it easier for people to consume.
So maybe we can think about this in the context of what you're showing at GlueCon. Can you tell us what this is about, how you're working with HyperLedger?
Yeah, so we wouldn't for a minute claim to be blockchain gurus or experts, but what stood out when I went to a blockchain conference in February this year was the need for management. And I spoke to John Walpert at the time about this, and he said, absolutely, this is like the next challenge. And so sure enough,
we should understand okay, go ahead, and then maybe you can help us understand what HyperLedger is too.
I'll do my best.
Yes.
So if I back out, HyperLedger is another example of a Linux Foundation collaborative project. This time, the goal is to create through a community and open source, a core blockchain platform that is open to all. Open to all means that IBM has contributed what they call the Open Blockchain project to that, which has now become one of the first contributions, and that now forms the Fabric project. And that's the one I know most about. So, the Fabric is essentially a way of standing up a blockchain network, and then programming it. And what I mean by that is you deploy a blockchain code into that network, and then it's set up. So there's three basic interactions: deploy, invoke, or query. So deploy stands up the actual blockchain application, and then invoke is some action on that. So the example, touch wood, we're working on to demo tomorrow is the asset management example, where ownership is ascribed to things like Picasso paintings and so forth, and you obviously want to ensure that only the right person, i.e. the owner of that asset, can transfer ownership to another participant in that blockchain. I think you'll appreciate, having no doubt many Picassos at home, that you'd be a bit upset if somebody just took one off the wall and handed it to the cleaner. It's a common problem, right?
I can totally understand that.
Essentially, it's an application for you.
Yeah. So invoke is how are you interacting with that blockchain? What are the legitimate or legal operations? And then query is just asking questions of it. And obviously, query is just what is the current state? Who owns what asset? So the HyperLedger project is a huge project. All we're doing is showing how we can sort of ease the deployment of blockchain applications in order to facilitate the whole dev test lifecycle writ large. Only now we're doing it with blockchain. So the technology or platform may be different, but it's trying to introduce the same methodology. So I'm pretty excited about this, but I have to also have a day job where keep Cloudsoft on the road, but it's fun to take time out and look at how we can apply what
delivering
we know.
great service brokers, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me, why is Cloudsoft right for this kind of project?
because we are uniquely, I think, qualified to understand how to deploy a complex distributed sort of infrastructure, application infrastructure, to use your term, across as many locations as are required, and not just deploy it, but then manage it on an ongoing basis. So we've become essentially, the control plane for that blockchain. But we're not in the code. This is important. It's like we're not in the data path, but we're providing the control plane to ensure that stays up. And if there are any issues, we deal with them.
So does that speak to your future, not in terms of blockchain, but in terms of that control plane story?
I think ultimately that's what we've always been, and it's just how it manifests itself. And that's all down to the autonomics that kind of informs everything we do ultimately.
So kind of extending that, so can you also, if you think about SDNs and SDS, can Cloudsoft, your AM can manage that?
Manage is a strong term,
or at least
where angels fear to tread and all that. Yeah. But we've worked closely with the Calico team as a good example, where they've provided the right hooks for us.
Okay.
So they're the masters of their universe,
okay,
but they give us the interface to that universe, which makes it easy or elegant for us to then construct the right concepts that we need for the applications. So that's kind of the way I see it.
So how does Cloud Foundry fit into this story then for you? Into this idea of this kind of distributed control plane? And why is Cloud Foundry relevant in that kind of story about the distributed control plane? I'm sure both of you can talk about this.
It's relevant because there is a growing community of people that are building applications and services using it, and we want to support that community.
Right.
And we see there's a real need to integrate what they're doing with the wider world.
Right.
And if you're an enterprise, that means typically your systems of record and so forth.
Right.
And so we're providing essentially, as always, we're enabling something, and here we're enabling somebody to develop a rich set of new applications, maybe targeted at their customers, but still access CRM and so on the back end in order to make that real. Okay. So it's all about making it real at the end of the day.
And is it like plain vanilla Cloud Foundry, or you have a specific distribution that you?
We work. This is the whole idea. Our mission is to work with any Cloud Foundry certified provider. Okay. So we're working down the list.
Okay.
And I think for us, it's really demonstrating we can do that is an important part of our value proposition. But heaven forbid you want to move from one to another, you can. It's not the end of the world.
Sure.
So what's your vision of a distributed control plane then, in terms of the context of Cloud Foundry?
Wow, what a question. I think my focus will remain on delivering the best, most stable Cloud Foundry platform that people can build control planes on. So we leverage where the community is building out, we will integrate all of the core components that become relevant, that our user community require us to be able to add into the search system. So for example, one of the things we're working very closely with is to start building those backing services out, those data services, full big data and analytics, control planes, just an extension to that, so that we can grow the right fundamental application components that can be assembled to meet a business's need, whatever industry they're in.
Okay.
Was that clear enough?
Oh,
Are you convinced? The marathon man. Are you convinced? Oh yeah, I'm convinced.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
We can do that another time.
Now I'm thinking of all the different parts that kind of fit into this new distributed control plane that that we're trying to still figure out. And that seems to be one of your toughest jobs, I expect. Because there's different forms of software-defined networking. Now everything is becoming software, right? Now you're thinking about Project Calico. You're thinking about storage and different kinds of storage environments. But you still have to work with the existing storage environments themselves. I'm just curious on your thinking about how how you guys process this kind of stuff and how you choose what projects to work with.
So on the specifics of networking and storage, I need to be clear here that, by and large, if we can work with something like an OpenStack environment and leverage that, we will. If on the other hand we're working in more of a sort of pure container environment, then we'll want to leverage things like Calico. So it's really just knowing, given the sort of the particular mission, how to accomplish that mission. So for me, that's all about integration points. It's about being able to understand the value of Calico, or understand the value of a Sienna network controller, or understand the value of Cloud Foundry, and in each case, maximize that value and try to stay out of it. Try not to get in the way. So, it's a bit like, if everything's fine, you don't see me. If it all goes wrong, then you blame me, right? So, if it's a control plane is sort of like that.
Yeah. How do you keep track of it all? I know you must read the new Stack, of course, but
Every
there must
morning,
be other ways
what do
too.
I do when I wake up?
but really, how do you keep track of all these different types of? It's
hard, right?
There's so much happening. There's so many different types.
But
of
even
projects.
within the specific communities, you look at the rate of delivery of all the new exciting features which are coming just from the Cloud Foundry and all of the projects. There are 20 plus projects we heard about now.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to stay on top of, but you have to. It's about consuming that and understanding where the value is and trying to get involved and giving back to that community. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, we love working with Cloudsoft, because we're helping them give back to various different communities out there, which are important to us and important to others.
The short answer is it's impossible, even with the new stack at my disposal.
Yeah,
and I mean, it must be the same for you guys,
No,
right?
it's true.
I mean,
It's endless.
But then, I don't obsess about Twitter, but I keep an eye on Twitter, and I probably see a tenth of the traffic I should see, but
Right.
hey, that's just the tenth I see. And I
Right.
mean, obviously I'm a little bit more, when I think about Cloud Foundry, I think, well, the right thing to do is go to the summit. I'll get a lot of information in a very short period of time. So it's not quite as random as, I'll go to 10% of the conferences on a sort of randomized basis. But I think you have to accept that, ultimately, it's through collaboration that ultimately you figure this stuff out. So the CNCF, the CFF, HyperLedger, these are important communities to be part of. And you also know that somebody else is watching your back. You can't, you need security, but there's a guy who's, or a PMC that's looking after that. Fantastic. So that's building a level of trust, and the transparency of open source enables that trust. So I think ultimately, when I used to do theater, the trust game was falling backwards,
Right.
and being caught. But you had to just let yourself go. And so I think this is an important part of the modern world. I mean, how do we create these communities, and how do we build that trust? And I think ultimately, I'm relying on that to a large extent.
As being part of the communities is the key part, and getting involved.
Yeah.
So, any last questions, Sriram?
I would like to talk a little bit more on your users. Like, where do you see the more adoption coming from? Which vertical?
Sure.
If something we can share, that'd be great.
Sure. So, delighted obviously that Atos are an important partner for us. We're also working closely with VirtuStream. Mm-hmm. So we found our niche, depending on which side of the Atlantic you are, is working with a small number of high value partners and engaging with them. Same with the Cloud Foundry folk. We're doing some work with Pivotal. We're talking to HPE, IBM, you name it. In fact, here's a great anecdote. So, wind the clock back, maybe 18 months or thereabouts. We're working with Citigroup, and they're looking at Cloud Foundry. They're evaluating it. They figured out very early on they needed to sort of tie in, back-end services, existing data sources, and so on. So they actually sponsored us to develop what we eventually contributed to
Brooklyn.
The Cloud Foundry Foundation as an incubator project, which was the kind of the core of the integration with Brooklyn, because they were working with us on Brooklyn. Lo and behold, I'm at this conference and I bump into Louis Paul, and Louis Paul, who instigated this whole thing by sponsoring that project, now pops up, working with the Cloud Foundry community, and moreover, he's now at HPE as part of the new team they're putting together to take their Cloud Foundry offering forwards. So that's another reason for coming to these places. You meet old friends, you make new friends, and it was a very, very small world. I mean, I was just having breakfast, and you just keep seeing people, and that's part of that community, and being part of that is just such a buzz.
Yeah.
Neat.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys very much for taking the time. Duncan, always good to see you. Adam, nice to meet you. Sriram, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Alex.
This has been another excellent episode of the New Stack Analysts. Thanks again.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Cloudsoft is the sponsor for this episode of the new Stack Analysts. Cloudsoft AMP makes it easy to operate complex applications across any cloud provider, private, public, or hybrid. AMP's policy-based management transforms cloud operations and liberates applications from infrastructure, allowing you to mix and match bare metal, virtual machines, and containers. Learn more at cloudsoft.io. Thanks again, and I hope to see you back at the show. Bye-bye.